Welcome. Tonight I will tell you a story about life in a colony on Mars. Make yourself comfortable, save this video, and let it carry you gently into a peaceful sleep. Now, let us begin our journey. You wake to a ceiling that is not a ceiling at all, but a curve of thick, layered glass, clear where the maintenance crew polished last week, faintly hazed where red dust has settled and learned patience. Beyond it, the sky is too thin to be called sky, a pale coin laid on stone, sun but smaller, light but brittle, the kind that breaks on edges. A filament of rust lifts from a far dune and unspools like thread tugged by a careful hand. Between you and all of that is the dome's quiet certainty. Stress ribs like the bones of a whale, hairline scuffs that each have a story and a date in the log, seals the color of old lemons, all of it holding the single thing that matters, air inside. The air tastes wrong in a way that means correct here, dry as a book's margin with a metallic afterthought, like licking a coin and deciding it was a good coin. It is not a gift, it is a recipe. Nitrogen borrowed, oxygen made, argon observed and allowed. The taste never quite leaves the tongue. It sits at the back of the mouth with the hum of fans and the subtle throb of pumps and says, "This is made, not found." You breathe it anyway because you are here. The habitat speaks in small domestic noises. A vent sighs, a valve clicks, a heat loop ticks as it remembers to be warm. On the wall above your bunk, a thin strip of LEDs lifts itself from night to morning by degrees, amber through peach into something that is almost day. The light is timed to people, not to Mars. Soul numbers creep across a display in a lazy digital crawl. In the corner, the suit rack blinks its courteous blue. One suit sealed, one cycling filters, one with its left wrist cuff open to the air like a mouth. Your berth is a slot more than a room, enough for a fold-down bunk, a net of pockets, a drawer that protests and then obeys. On the bulkhead, someone taped a postcard of water that falls from a cliff and actually moves. The paper has rounded at the corners, as if the colony's recycled humidity had tried to drink it. Another pocket holds a lucky rock from a beach you do not remember. The sand it once carried has become a superstition in the lint trap. The morning routines are not chores so much as liturgy. A cloth towel, pre-moistened, nearly scentless, draws a day's worth of dust from skin that never quite stops tasting of the dome. You brush your teeth with paste that makes no foam and no promises. You swallow the rinse because water is a democracy and everybody votes. Your jumpsuit lives on a hook labeled with your name and mass. It closes with a hiss where the collar meets the collarbone, and the suit wants to think about pressure even if you are not going outside. Socks are new today. Someone tagged them with a printed grid so you can darn them along lines when lines become holes. Shoes Velcro and then clamp, soles soft and slightly sticky, taught to kiss ladders and gratings without complaint. In the corridor, the day has already begun, even though the sky has not decided what to be. People pass with mugs and tablets, nodding the kind of nod that says, "I see you and the pump sees me, so we are both accounted for." No one walks fast here unless the air tells them to. Speed is expensive. Momentum is a bill that comes due at the next hatch. The bulkheads carry their graffiti of care, striped tape where shoulders tend to scuff, handprints of children's paint stamped at knee height, a line of stickers near the galley hatch that marks how tall each of them was when Phobos last crossed the sun. The galley smells like a plan. Warm metal, wet leaves, something toasted that used to be algae and now claims to be bread with more conviction than last week. A woman in a grey apron portioning breakfast moves with the thrift of someone who can hear grams. Trays accept their logic. A square of protein cut neat as a promise. A spoon of greens so bright they look like language invented to cheer the eye. A heel of the bread that is almost bread. A squeeze of something that calls itself citrus and almost gets away with it. A jar of salt lives under a label that says event, but a pinch appears at each table anyway because last year's crop was rude and this year's is generous. Coffee is a rumor in a mug, reconstituted, cheerful, thin. The colonists drink it the way they read old stories, for the shape of the comfort, not the taste. Windows are rationed like sweets. The galley has two, ovals the size of plates, thick as a fist. Through them, the red plane sits with the patience of stone, and the wind draws cursive over the surface that no one can read and everyone respects. Beyond the perimeter berm, an array of panels lifts its faces to a sun that has not yet earned anyone's affection for the day. Someone at the table points with their chin at a pale smudge marching the horizon left to right. Another answers, "Devil," around a mouthful. No one looks worried. The forecast has been good since last night's briefing, and a devil is only dramatic when it forgets its manners. Briefing is call and response more than meeting. A screen maps the day in blocks. Hydroponics checks, suit maintenance, panel sweep line B, greenhouse cation balance at 1100, comms window earth +7. Tasks migrate between names with the smoothness of muscle memory. There is no command voice, there is a communal one. It says, K7 Bay is running warm again. It says, we'll swap the number 3 filter early. We have the margin. It says, school will tour recycling. Please keep the dryer panel safe to touch. It says, whoever called the algae bread pond cake owes the bakery a song. You eat. The bread is better than your memory. The greens taste of the light that grew them and the pattern of pumps beneath. There is a sweetness the fresh batch never had before. Someone's eyes flicker with private pride. You try not to notice the hum and fail. The hum is everywhere, an invisible river you stand beside even when you stand still. The colonists do not hear it unless it changes shape. The children do not hear it at all. They hear the squeak of chairs, the tap of spoons, the quiet curse when a seal refuses on the first try. One boy balances his cup to the exact milliliter. The table edge marks a height his grandmother taught him years ago, enough to drink and still enough to share. The dome brightens as if it remembered a story. The LEDs soften toward daylight. Shadows thicken under bunks and tables and then decide not to be mean about it. Someone opens the inner blind of a high viewport, and a stripe of actual sun crosses the mess like a ruler laid down for a moment and then pocketed. The red outside is less red where it slopes away. The dunes there take color the way skin takes breath after a held moment. You walk the loop because everyone does. past the med bay where clamps shine like jewelry and the oxygen concentrator blinks its unlabeled truths, past the printer room where spools of filament glow like fruit in a careful market, past the laundry where ultrasonics insist on cleanliness with a faint mosquito whine. A door marked mech hums in a lower key. Another marked AIR stays quiet because quiet means right. At a crossway, a sign in marker and tape reads, "Left to green, right to blue." Someone added, "Smaller, left smells better." You go left. The greenhouse is a green lie and a gift. Heat slicks the face, water beads on the ribs, and fans move air the way a hand moves a lullaby through hair. Racks float on nutrient baths that mumble to themselves. Roots dangle like pale handwriting. Leaves consult with LEDs and decide to go on living. A woman in sleeve protectors leans into a lane and murmurs apology to a row of tomatoes as she lifts a leaf for inspection. The leaf answers by not protesting. Instruments blink quietly. pH, EC, ppm, 3 decimals of reality that keep breakfast honest. A child holds up a jar with a single seed pressed into cloth and shakes it like a rattle. A man jokes, "Careful, you'll wake it angry." And the child blinks solemnly and puts the jar down with both hands. Not everything is food. Flowers live in one corner for reasons that compute poorly on any spreadsheet. 3 clumps of something that claims yellow. A small riot of blue that looks like a mistaken sky. A trellis that takes beans on one side and wishes on the other. The pollinator bots, tiny, lazy, gold as warm coins, blink from their charging rail and float in figure 8s when the schedule nudges them. An older woman watches them the way other people watch weather. When one stutters, she reaches up and taps it exactly as a nurse taps a gauge. The bot remembers itself and returns to bees' work without bees. You are handed tasks even if no one says your name. A tray slides into your hands with small seedlings that need escorting from nursery to second rack. A meter is placed in your palm with a quiet "when." The light says drift. Call me. A checklist glows on a screen at elbow height. Not boxes to tick, but a road to walk. The work imposes its pace, no slower than necessary, no faster than wise. The floor plates give back the soft complaint of rubberized soles. Somewhere a pump decides today is the day to hum a half tone lower than usual, and someone says, without looking up, filter. Through another window, the outside world pretends motionless. A rover sits beyond the airlock with one wheel raised, knuckled against a service stand like a horse leaning into a curry comb. Its dust is a history that refuses to be wiped entirely away. Every brush leaves a ghost of red on the cloth that says, "We were here too." The panel field throws back sunlight in square arguments. Between its rows, a figure in an orange suit moves with the courtesy Mars demands. Slow, precise, one hand always remembering where the next handhold will be. Over the comm you can just make out breath and numbers and the kind of jokes people tell themselves so the rhythm stays true. You try to imagine a siren and fail because there are no sirens here, only tones. Tones that mean put that down gently and look at me. Tones that mean Suit Bay wants a word. Tones that mean this is a drill we will treat as a story we hope never to tell. The colonists speak of them the way farmers speak of clouds, with respect, with habit, with the suspicion that attention is the only luck worth cultivating. A child asks you what rain sounds like. You say, like this, and pour a trickle from a jug onto a tray so the water makes a sound like small applause. The child nods, entirely satisfied, and goes back to coloring the earth with the wrong blue and the right green, and a dot where they've been told the colony lives now. An older man pauses by the tray later, dips a finger, touches the metal lip, and smiles as if some old muscle has remembered its name. You think foolishly of weather apps and open windows and a breeze that has never been processed through anyone's care. The colony thinks of filters and feed lines, of panel cleaning scheduled when the devils nap, of resupply windows measured in months and meters per second. They count kilowatt hours and liters and grams and call this counting good morning. You count walls and call it fear. Here is the first truth, and it does not need speakers or sirens to make itself known. You would not last a day in a Mars colony because even dawn here is a negotiation you don't yet know how to conduct. Coffee is math. Breath is engineering. Light is a duty cycle printed on a sheet above a switch. People read gauges and plants and each other the way you read weather on your skin back home. They do not hurry and they do not stop. The dome breathes. The pumps agree. The red beyond the glass pretends not to notice, and the day goes on. The colony's morning widens the way a hatch opens, not all at once, not with a flourish, but with seals releasing in the right order. Tasks find their owners without being called. A checklist blossoms on a wall display and trims itself as fingers brush it in passing. Somewhere a pump changes key from night to day, and only the engineers notice, the way bakers notice dough when it has exactly the right shine. Laundry is a hum you feel through the floor. No slosh, no waste. Ultrasonics worry dust and skin from fabric in a shallow pan, the water carried off to be reasoned with and returned under another name. Shirts come out not scented like anything, just clean in a way that makes hands remember their own temperature. A girl with a work badge too big for her wrist marks a grid on a pair of socks with a felt pen, little squares ready for future mending. Her grandmother shows her how to tie off the thread with a knot that never slips and never shows. Down the spine corridor, the recycler holds court. Its front panel is a polite, unblinking face. pH here, pressure there, a string of figures sliding like fish. A clear tube carries yesterday's breath toward this morning's water. Another carries yesterday's tea toward tomorrow's greens. A boy on a school tour stands on his toes to see a set of membranes flex like gills. The instructor taps the housing with a knuckle and says nothing. The machine answers with a steadiness that is better than good news. The school lives in a room that used to be storage until someone measured how much learning could be stacked in the same volume. The walls hold maps that are not of here. Oceans and clouds, rivers braided like hair, mountain chains in blues and greens children touch with 2 fingers as if they could feel water through laminate. On a low shelf, a jar sits with a fern curling in damp, the only soil in the building not weighed and named. The teacher begins with a weather report that is not about rain. External, -28, he says. Wind light, devils possible after local noon. UV index unkind. Inside, all systems nominal. The children recite back the numbers that matter to them. Oxygen partial, humidity, CO 2 parts per million. They do it the way others say the days of the week. A chime that means listen politely walks the corridor and steps into rooms. It is the briefing tone for those who will go outside. In the suit bay, orange hangs in 2 neat rows, soft armor for a hard world. A tech runs a hand down a seam and feels without looking. Fingers learn quicker than eyes when rubber has ideas. Filters are swapped. One early, one on time, one kept despite its age because its numbers still sing. A helmet is lifted to the light and turned until the scratches admit themselves. A smear of paste makes one less truthful. The suits exhale their overnight air and pull in fresh pumps clicking like patient metronomes. A woman checks the valves by ear and by habit. Left, right, then the one that never fails and must be kept humble. You help where you can. A glove is turned right, its finger liners smoothed. Someone's hand slides in and flexes, and the glove remembers what a thumb is for. A second person reads numbers from a tablet, and a third answers with readings from a suit's chest until the 2 lists agree. The airlock hatch stands open like a mouth at the dentist. Before anyone steps through, a hand lays flat on its frame. Not ritual, not superstition exactly, but the contact between 2 things that will keep one another honest. Breakfast dishes migrate back to the galley, and lunch begins pretending to itself that it will be special. The baker, who last year would not call herself a baker because there was nothing that acted like flour, cuts pond cake into squares that have almost learned crumb. She sets aside a tray to trade for 2 sprigs of basil someone teased from the herb garden as a dare. A line of mugs dries upside down, dripping into a tray that will feed the first rinse of pans. A jar labeled salt, event, hides in plain sight. Someone salts their slice and hums apology. No one objects. The new batch tastes like generosity, and generosity like salt. Greenhouse morning is a congregation. The hydroponic lanes whisper and shine. A net floats to catch a trailing root. A hand in a sleeve protector nudges a drip emitter until its bead finds the leaf it married yesterday. Pollinator bots wake in a lazy gold and drift down the trellis like bored bees. A child reaches out a finger and is intercepted by a mother's hand before the instruction leaves her mouth. A meter on a lanyard chirps adrift and is silenced by a turn of a collar. The reading moves toward rightness as if embarrassed to have been seen. Not everything is growth. A panel of LEDs in Bay K7 refuses to come to full brightness. 2 people crouch under it with a panel off and a notebook that is more grease than paper. They argue in the kind of friendliness that means both are right. Voltage drop on the run, cracked solder on the 3rd board. A teenager holds the light and learns by watching how slowness can be faster than haste. When the board comes free at last, he carries it to the printer room like a drummer carrying a snare, careful not to scuff a corner. The printer's hood lifts its own head and warms its throat. The comms room fills in layers. Automated regularities first, telemetry from a weather mast farther out on the plain, a data dump from a drone that dreamed of the canyon and came home with integers for bodies to decipher later. Then the human window opens like a shy eye. Voices from Earth arrive thinned by distance and filled by love. A grandmother's face appears on a screen, softer than you remember because your memory lived in another atmosphere. Her hello reaches your ear with the taste of copper in it. Your reply leaves with your breath in a tube so thin you could thread it. The delay is not offensive. It is a courtliness you adapt to. You wait between each exchange the way people once waited for letters and used the waiting to compose their next kindness. The rover crew has been in suits for 20 minutes by the time the airlock closes behind them. Through the small port, the red outside looks flatter, meaner, closer. Their voices come through the habitat like sound through bone, clear where it matters, almost tender where it doesn't. Line B looks clean until column 12, someone says, and another answers with a rasp of brush against glass. Dust climbs over everything here as if it wants to be everyone's friend. It is combed off panels with tools that have learned the right amount of persuasion. It is vacuumed from seals. It is lifted from joints with sticky pads that die like heroic flies and are born again in the printer an hour later. In the workshop, quiet is concentration. A woman leans over a microscope, patient as frost, soldering a connection on a board the size of a fingernail. She lets the solder bead become a small, bright pond, and then freezes it mid-thought. Beside her, a man files the burr from a printed bracket and runs a finger along the edge until the edge forgets to cut. A child stands at a bench with a pile of broken toy parts and learns that hinges can be printed in one go if you leave the right kind of gap and enough respect. Medic checks happen like greetings. "How are you?" means, "Let me hear your lungs." "Sleep okay?" means, "What did your heart decide while you were resting?" Blood pressure cuffs hiss like small snakes. Oximeters glow at fingers and then blink approval. A woman blinks back at the doctor with the stillness of someone keeping a secret from the body they share. The doctor nods at the graph, says, "More water, less heroics," and both of them smile because neither will listen without at least trying to. In a corner near the hatch that leads to the mech bay, a notice board manages to be both official and human. Alerts on yellow. Panel 3C suspicious. Avoid the east walkway during de-icing. The school tour will have sticky hands. Consider your cables. Requests on blue. Trade 2 hours of algae for an hour of basil. Looking for a book about rain. Lost. 1 old coin for a game no one remembers. Reward, a good story. A child adds a drawing of the dome with stars and 2 small moons that are in the wrong places and therefore perfect. The day keeps its krill of interruptions, small tasks that crowd and disperse without hurting the larger shape. A hatch squeaks and gets a whisper of floor grease. A seal complains and is told kindly to behave. The main air monitor dips a single digit then returns, and 3 people glance up without moving their hands. A botanist holds a leaf to the light and snips a thread of dead, a priest's mercy at the tip of a pair of scissors. The baker opens the oven that is not quite an oven and loses a smell that is not quite bread, and everyone seems a little taller. By mid-morning, the routine has braided itself into something that can be leaned on. Solar comes in green. Storage levels sit in their respectable bands. The algae tone is smug. The oxygen line strides like a man who slept well. The wind outside lifts a devil and then sets it down like a parent with a child who has been carried quite enough. The eternal dust lightly powders the dome until a maintenance arm sighs out and erases a smile's worth. Inside, a teenager measures with a ruler how tall a bean has become in a day and writes the number in a neat column that will one day look like a prayer. You watch, and the watching is a kind of work. You begin to hear the way the place uses sound to keep its own diary. The tick shift in the heat loop when the corridor is full of bodies. The deeper purr of the extractor when the galley is making something people will remember. The minute long darkness in the air pumps. That means the filters have turned their pages. The colonists do not chase these sounds. They keep a polite ear out, the way people in old towns once learned their clocks. Someone taps the table near you twice, knuckles, not hard. It is a small agreement. Time to refill the water stations. You lift the slender reservoir and walk the loop, fitting the spout into each bottle's mouth, capping each with the cloth and charcoal that make it real. At each stop, hands that did not ask for help move aside from consoles, plants, tools. Thanks, someone says, with the thank you kept gentle and clean. When the reservoir says it is empty by becoming slightly lighter than kindness, you return it to the recycler and watch the line on the panel rise like a tide. A boy at the schoolroom door holds up his jar. Inside, the seed has pushed a veil of white into the cloth so slowly that it can only be seen by memory. Look, he says, and the teacher nods as if the colony had just received a letter from itself and found the news good. Here then, the second truth finds you without theatrics. You would not last a day in a Mars colony because you think morning ends when breakfast dishes are dry. Here it reaches into every seam, into filters swapped on time and before time, into socks gridded for future mending, into a chalked number that says the devils may dance afternoon, and so the panels will be swept before. Rest is later, but it will be made, not found. Safety is made. Lunch will be made. Even the stories the children tell will be made, printed from scraps and strung together with filament and patience. The dome hums as if to agree. Outside, the red is busy pretending it has always been here. Inside, someone sings to themselves at a bench, a song made of 3 notes and a promise to put every tool back exactly where it belongs. The day carries on, shored by people who count what can be counted and keep what cannot be counted safe by paying attention. Work takes the shape of the dome and then spills gently past it. Inside, it is hands and gauges. Outside, it is breath and sand. The morning has already braided itself into steadiness by the time the first airlock cycle clears its throat. In the suit bay, orange hangs like ripe fruit. People step into their own mirrors. Legs, hips, torso. The suit zips itself into person shape with the slow persuasion of practiced hands. Buddy eyes, buddy hands, someone says out of habit. Palms run seams, thumbs find valves by name. A glove is turned and smoothed, fingers walking inside until each fingertip remembers its home. Numbers are read twice: pressure, oxygen, CO2 scrubber margin. A helmet is raised, checked for hair, lowered. The click at the collar is soft as a secret given and kept. The airlock is a room that knows how to be smaller. 4 boots on the checker plate, 4 tethers clipped, a hand on the hatch frame the way a sailor touches a door jamb. Light step from amber to green. The hiss is a friendly snake. Pressure easing down makes the ears bloom and close like careful flowers. Over the comms, voices go ceremonial for 30 seconds. Suit 1, good. 2, good. Delta P steady. Latch green. The outer door unlatches with a sound you feel more than hear. The planet waits without expression. Outside is not silence. It is a different kind of machine noise. Your own fans, your own pump, the small wind scratching dust along the matting. The suits move with the courtesy Mars demands, measured steps along the mesh walkways, lanyards tailed to ring bolts that have known this tug 100 times. Dust tries to be everyone's friend. Brushes tell it to find another hobby. Panel row B leans like a crowd toward the sun. Each rectangle earns its keep in kilowatts and patience. A gloved hand sweeps with a soft pad. Red lifts in a reluctant veil and shows glass underneath. Someone says, "Column 12 is sulking," and a second voice answers, "Noted. Frame flex, we'll shim after lunch." Beyond the panel field, the dome's skin shows its seams the way faces show laugh lines. An infrared camera blinks open on a wrist. Warm patches tell their truth. Cool patches offer their approval. A bead of sealant is laid with a surgeon's wrist, the kind that tries to be invisible and fails only at its own pride. The tether tugs once, reminding a heel that trust belongs to clip, not habit. Devil, not a storm, just a slouch of dust, strolls the horizon like a tall story too lazy to be scary. "Keep it to the flats, friend," someone says to no one, and the devil obeys. Inside, the green world busies itself with water and light. The hydroponic lanes breathe in quiet numbers, flow rates, pH drifting a tenth, EC forgetting and being reminded. Sleeved arms lift leaves the way librarians lift old pages. Tomatoes are told to choose stems over rumor. Cucumbers are given new twine, their tendrils accepting the gift with greedy grace. The pollinator bots bump awake, lazy coins on a summer afternoon, and trace figure eights along blossom rows. When one stalls in midair, a forefinger taps its belly, and it remembers bees' work without bees. Cart rattles in with a tray of seedlings, basil the color of good ideas, lettuce as bright as a kind word. A child rains a mist across them with a bottle that used to be something else. Each bead finds a leaf and becomes part of its memory. In Bay K7, the sulking light panel finally loses the argument. The printed board, still warm from the machine that made it, slides into its slot. The wires accept their lot without theatrics. A meter on a lanyard blinks and then steadies, photosynthetic photons counting themselves to sleep. Elsewhere, work is metal and heat and patience. The printer hood lifts on a hinge that was itself printed last year when the shipment missed a window. New hinges are born in a slow curl of plastic that smells faintly like a rainy toy store. A bracket emerges, is filed along its edge until the edge forgets to be an edge. In the mech room, a technician leans into the hum of the oxygenator. The Sabatier's belly glows on a screen. CO2, learning to become water and methane. Water remembering how to become oxygen and hydrogen. oxygen taking the elevator upstairs to where lungs are always waiting. Numbers slide, a hand hovers, then settles. No alarms. The best music is the kind that almost isn't. Lunch gets assembled not as reward, but as interval. Pancake squares line a tray with something like crumb. A woman lays 3 basil leaves across the top as if crowning a child in a play. Salt, event, appears where anyone can see it and where no one will name it. A pinch goes into the soup because bodies are keeping promises today and deserve the favor. Trays travel like parcels, jokes travel with them. Someone owes the bakery a song and sketches a chorus on a napkin. Outside, the rover crew moves from panels to perimeters. The dome's skirt, berm and barrier gets its daily inspection. Anchors checked, mesh tightened where wind thought about ideas. A gloved finger rubs frost from a gauge window. The frost smears and forgives. A sample scoop takes a careful bite of regolith, where yesterday's devil forgot its crumbs. The scoop clicks shut and is labeled with numbers that will be a bedtime story for a microscope later. Radiation quiet, the dosimeter says in its only voice. UV unkind, says the other. Copy, replies everyone's shadow. In the schoolroom, the weather report that is not weather is amended for small ears. Devils expected after local noon, the teacher says, and a dozen drawings add little spirals to their horizons. One spiral gets eyes and a name and a smile. The teacher does not correct it. A jar with a seed wears its first white thread like a ribbon. The class takes a field trip to the recycler and stands on tiptoe to watch yesterday's breath turn into tomorrow's water. The instructor does not explain it again because the machine is explaining it better than he can. Maintenance is a tide that never goes out. A hand on a hatch hears squeak before ear does. A whisper of grease teaches the hinge manners. A tool that has forgotten its hook is replaced before scolding. The person who forgot it returns it anyway, twice. A medic walks the loop with a small cart and a smaller smile, trading lancet pricks for stories and advice for compliance. More water, fewer heroics, she says again, and someone salutes with a mug. The comms window opens like a throat clearing. Earth speaks with a mouthful of distance and arrives in the room like light moved into sound by kindness. A father in an apartment you can smell in memory holds up a dog. The dog looks left, then right, then decides it knows you and thumps its tail as if gravity has improved. You wait, then laugh. Then say a sentence small enough to fit through the tube that connects everything. Your voice comes back to you in 10 heartbeats, someone else's joy wrapped around it. By early afternoon, the devils keep their promise and waltz across the flats, tails knitting and fraying like gossip. Panel row C gets a second sweep. The brushes don't need to be begged. Inside, humidity forgets itself for 5 minutes and is reminded. The algae tone, smug since breakfast, grows quieter when someone swaps a filter early on purpose. A seam in the corridor tape gets replaced with a fresh stripe. The old one gets stuck on a child's notebook as decoration. The dome learns and forgets and learns like a good body. Work looks like repetition and isn't. Today's leaf is not yesterday's leaf, even if the scissors make the same whisper. Today's dust is new, even if the brush strokes repeat. The difference lives in the way a suit's fan runs slightly higher because the wearer is thinking about home, in the way a pump hums half a note lower because a filter is 3 hours closer to wise. The colonists hear these differences and answer them not with drama but with practice. Their pace does not hurry and does not slouch. It is the speed of oxygen staying oxygen. A teenager newly tall is given the panel brush. He lifts it like a standard, sets it down like a broom. The line between clumsy and careful is crossed in one step he will not remember, and everyone else watches without watching and breathes a little easier for reasons no one names. In the greenhouse, a woman teaches a vine to turn the way it will be glad of in a week. She ties it with a soft loop that will not scold when the stem grows. "There," she says to it, and the vine says nothing because plants are polite. When the rover crew comes back in, the airlock makes its room larger trick. Dust drops off suits the way sleep drops off a face at noon, reluctantly but definitely. Helmets rise, heads shake, hair lies down. "Column 12 shims good," someone says. Skirt holds. Sample jar labeled. Panels smug. The words have the shape of victory and the taste of maintenance. Suits exhale and are hung, each on its own hook like a promise kept for later. And here is the third truth, arriving with none of the horns you imagined. You would not last a day in a Mars colony because you think work is a list you cross off. Here it is, a circle you keep walking. Panels cleared before devils dance, filters swapped before the tone thinks to complain, leaves tied before their weight argues with gravity, hinges soothed before they remember how to squeal. Safety is not an alarm. It is the habit of attention paid on time. The red outside remains patient. The dome hums. Hands move. Breath goes in and out, engineered and ordinary, and the day continues to hold. After the rover crew has hung their suits back on their hooks and the dust has been persuaded to live on the mats instead of lungs, the colony's day changes posture. It doesn't slow so much as turn to smaller work. Domestic, ordinary, the kind that braces the bigger tasks without asking to be named. Lunch is an interval set to the metronome of pumps. Trays arrive in a procession that takes the same route every soul. Soup that remembers algae but has learned better manners. Squares of pond cake with a new humility of crumb. 3 basil leaves placed on the long pan like a joke everyone keeps telling because it keeps getting funnier. Someone moves the jar labeled salt, event, a little closer to the middle and no one sees it move back. A pinch is forgiveness for bodies that worked ahead of schedule. A child counts out loud how many spoonfuls make a bowl feel like enough. The number is different every day and therefore a lesson. Cups are filled to the line on the mug wall, the line that an older woman marked with tape years ago, the height that means drink, but leave the next person a mouth. After eating, the galley becomes a system again. Pans are rinsed with water that knows it is auditioning for new roles. The first grey goes to floor cloths, the second to plants, the third to the recycler's clear throat. Mugs drip upside down over a tray that will not lose even the condensation. A teenager wipes down the long table with a square of cloth and then hangs the cloth on a line where air will turn it into tomorrow's tool. No one calls this cleaning. People call it reset, and the word fits in the mouth the way a good wrench fits a bolt. The schoolroom absorbs the hour like a sponge. The teacher lowers the window shades to make the screen modest and brings up a map of oceans none of the students have met in person. On one wall, 2 framed leaves press their veins against glass, paper-thin relics that arrived with a shipment and made a grown man sit down without warning. The day's lesson pretends to be geography, then remembers itself and becomes breath math. Oxygen partials, why your mask smells like metal, why dust is not a pet. Children recite the safe values the way others once recited months. What does rain sound like? A younger one asks, and the teacher points to a jar. He tips a measure of water onto the lid. The clatter is small and perfect. The class copies the sound, palms tapping their desks, knock, 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 until the room knows rain. There is a library, though it wouldn't look like one to you. Its books live laminated, punched, bound with spiral wire, their corners rounded by recycled humidity and patient hands. They smell like polymer that pretends to be pulp. A shelf holds 3 paperbacks that made the crossing only because someone lied on a manifest. Their spines have become fragile as whispers. There are also files, thousands of them, read on screens whose glass has been polished by thumbs to a sort of love. People read in the low chairs when the light is kind. Manuals, old novels, a collection of recipes that make jokes about ingredients no one has tasted in a lifetime. A girl with a bright braid turns a page as if the page were a sleeping thing. Mending is done wherever elbows can make a bench. Socks with gridded squares are honored with small squares of thread. Leftover filament unraveled to softness, then taught to behave like cotton. A seam on a jumpsuit gets rebuked with tiny stitches that even the wearer will forget. A boy embroiders a patch for a suit knee, a snowflake that no one here has ever seen in the wild, copied from a picture and now hoping to become fact by repetition. The patch says nothing brave. It says KNEE in tidy letters because labels are a kindness. In the printer room, new objects cool under a hood. A hinge neutral as a sentence, a spoon handle with a small groove for a thumb, a cap that will keep a jar honest. The printer's head scratches its way along a path like a beetle drawing in fine sand. A woman removes the support lattice from a part and saves it in a bin marked "for later." Later is always a bin with good intentions here. Later sometimes becomes a filter cage, sometimes becomes a toy ladder, sometimes becomes a sculpture shaped like a spiral because someone needed to see a shape that doesn't serve any purpose right away. The recycler says yes and no all afternoon in its many voices. It says yes to grey water that behaved itself. It says no to a stray hair tie and sends it back from its mouth with the offended little cough of a cat. A boy on tour watches a membrane bow and remembers the word semi-permeable the way you remember a person's face. He will use it at dinner like a party trick. The instructor taps the housing again, a tiny habitual benediction, and the machine answers by not changing tone. Not everything inside the dome is made of function. Along the walkway between green and blue zones, someone has taped paper circles to the ceiling, a model of night. The moons in wrong places on purpose because a child insisted that the moons are allowed to be where stories say they should be. The circles spin when air moves. The circles are unapproved and deeply approved. In the common room, 3 instruments that never met each other on Earth share a corner. A borrowed keyboard that forgets middle C when it's tired, a drum with a printed frame and a skin stretched from packaging film, and a small reed flute that was smuggled in a boot. After lunch, someone always finds a scale on one of them, and someone else always remembers a harmony. This is not performance. It is calibration of another sort. The notice board keeps its blue and yellow territories. Blue for requests, neat in their handwriting, trade one afternoon of algae harvest for 2 cuttings of basil, seeking a story about clouds, missing, coin from a game no one remembers how to play, found, coin, reward not necessary, will accept poem. Yellow for alerts, also neat. Avoid the east walkway during de-icing. Suit bay floor damp. Step kind. 3C panel loose at corner. Do not fix unless your name begins with E or L. Someone tucks a drawing under a magnet. The dome with a cape flying over a canyon. Children waving from windows shaped like stars. The magnet holds the drawing the way a person holds a promise. Even the med bay, white, kind, precise, joins the domestic hour. The doctor's cart breathes plastic and antiseptic and peppermint because someone between shipments figured out how to grow peppermint in a window box. She visits benches, puts fingers on wrists, says good and drink and sit a minute. She scolds no one. She praises a bruise for fading. She applauds a blood pressure that remembered its training. She recommends basil tea to an anxious apprentice, not for the chemistry, for the permission to sit with a cup. The apprentice obeys and afterward swears he can taste green. A small ceremony happens every sol at this time and no one names it. 2 people take a ladder to a high viewport and wash its outside with a wiper arm while standing safely inside. The red that has been trying to be permanent there all morning gives up and slides away. The view returns, a sheet of panels blinking like a thoughtful animal. The berms curve, the farther hills that pretend they invented silence. The 2 cleaners tap the glass with their knuckles when they're done. The sound is dull and perfect. It means hold. Children are woven through all of this the way thread is woven through a mat. They ferry small things, a spool, a note, a bolt that did not want to be alone any longer. They are given jobs that are larger than they look. Check the color on this strip each hour. Tattle to an adult if the strip decides to lie. A girl is entrusted with unlocking the herb closet and counting stems very slowly so no one can pretend the basil was never there. A boy sits on the floor and teaches a pollinator bot to remember the difference between a blossom and a shirt. The bot hums apology when it forgets. The tone that means prepare does not sound in the afternoon. It is not needed. Instead, the colony maintains a quiet choreography that preempts emergencies. A door is left unlatched, not because anyone is leaving, but because an open path is a muscle kept limber. A cart is returned to a corner with its handle facing out and its wheels turned straight. Later, no one will have to tug and swear. A vent screen is snapped back after a lint check. The little piles of red trapped there look like punctuation and are brushed into a jar. Small order everywhere. Small respect all the time. If there are elders, their stories are not about heroism today. They are about the time the washer forgot a cycle and how the whole dome smelled like a lake for an hour, and how everyone just stood still and breathed like thieves because the smell wanted to go. Or the time a batch of algae went bitter and the baker coaxed it into becoming crackers somehow, and those crackers ended arguments at dinner for a week. A child asks an elder if Earth is loud. Yes, she says, but it's also quiet in a way that isn't dangerous. And the child nods, like that makes a new kind of sense. Quiet hour is not an order. It arrives like a blanket that chose the right lap. Lights lean warmer. Screens dim themselves out of courtesy. The pumps lower their voices as filters turn a page. People use the soft time to sharpen soft things, a pencil, a memory, a plan. The girl with the bright braid unrolls a silk pouch and shows a friend 3 seeds she has been given to shepherd to sprout. They look like nothing, like dry punctuation. The friend treats them like jewels anyway. A man in the corner, eyes closed, counts the seconds between the small thumps of the heat loop as it makes the long turn into evening. His counting is not superstition. It is a way of measuring when a machine is happy. Here then, the fourth truth lays itself down among the socks and seedlings and spoons. You would not last a day in a Mars colony because you think everyday life is what happens between the important parts. Here, everyday life is the important part. Filters rinsed before they clog, cups filled to a remembered line, basil leaves traded like festival tickets, a window wiped so the outside can be seen and therefore respected. Safety is stitched from chores. Comfort is printed, mended, tuned. Even laughter is rationed enough to last and generous enough to feel like more. The red beyond the glass keeps its counsel. Inside, people keep theirs with kindness and checklists and a music of pumps that has become, somehow, home. The warning does not arrive as siren or shout. It arrives as a change in the dome's breathing that only the careful notice, then as a tone, 3 notes stepping down as politely as a teacher tapping a board. The notice board adds a new yellow card, dust front advancing from west. Panel output will drop. Secure externals. Close louver sets 2 and 3. Storm setting on intakes. Indoor only until further notice. No one runs. Running is noisy, and noise makes the pumps forget their parts. People finish the sentence they are in. Stitch, turn, wipe, place, then stand up into the work that was always going to come. The greenhouse shades begin their slow descent, slats angling so leaves will get light without the harsh grit of the sky. The pollinator bots dock in a gold row, sleeping coins under their rail. A hand slides the herb locker shut and turns its little printed key. Basil counts better with the door closed. In the corridor, someone wheels a cart along the vents, clipping on storm screen that look like fine snow but feel like soft metal. Storm setting, they say to the room, and the room lowers its voice. In Suit Bay, orange stays on its hooks. This is not an outside day now unless someone insists on becoming a story. The bay still gets ready anyway. Filters swapped early, seals checked by fingertips, oxygen bottles topped and tested, 3 spare tethers coiled and hung exactly where hands that are not thinking too clearly will still find them. A child comes to the line and recites the airlock steps in a whisper, not because she might go out, but because drills are a kind of lullaby that calms the adults. Buddy eyes, buddy hands, she ends, and two techs grin inside their mouths. Windows get their lids. A ladder leans, a wiper arm comes home, a viewport blushes with the faint smear of clean. The world outside softens to a red that contains more red inside it. Panel row C hunches into the wind. Dust draws cursive over its faces that no one bothers to read. The maintenance arm, sensing gust, folds and waits, its hinge remembering patience. The berm holds its line as if it had been born for this hour, which in a way it had. The power display in the galley ticks one shade down and then another. No alarm. Just the mathematics of sky and panel and dust settling into a shorter column. People answer with the things you would not notice if you weren't taught. Lights slide to a kinder level. Chargers go on hooks instead of into ports. The printed oven agrees to be a little less itself. The baker lifts pound cake from the rack and sets it on the counter with the care you give something you plan to share later than you thought. A jar marked salt event migrates toward the back like a shy guest. The school tour diverts from the recycler to the map. The teacher points not at Earth for once, but at a schematic of this place. Dome like a cupped hand, berm like a forearm, panel field like a garden that forgot to be green. He taps the lines in the order they will be leaned on. Storage bands here, fuel cells there, water reserves, the oxygenator's stubborn grace. He asks the children to count with their fingers the minutes it takes a tone to sound. The seconds between one and the next, the breaths that fit there. They count, and the counting makes those spaces feel like something owned. In the workshop, people cover the printers' mouths with mesh so dust does not join the parts list. A bracket that was going to be a hinge today puts itself on the for later shelf without sulking. A man wipes his tools and lays a cloth over them because order is insurance and the storm will want to disarrange the smallest things first. The medic walks the loop like someone measuring a hem, touching shoulders lightly, saying, "Drink more now," and "Sit near green if you get headachy," and "No heroics," the phrase's edges rounded by use. Someone hands her a mug of basil tea as if she had not herself suggested it. The greenhouse becomes a chapel of water. Humidity rises deliberately. Leaves hold it the way hands hold a promise. Pumps lower their voices as if to keep from waking whatever the sky intends. A botanist moves along the lanes, adjusting drips with small turns. This much, yes. That much later. You, not now. She ties a vine to its support with a loop that will slip kindly when the stem remembers to grow even during a storm. "We will make our own weather for a bit," she tells a tomato, and the tomato believes her because she is the one who always keeps time. On the panel field, the last crew from the morning shifts reasons with clips and ducks as a Gus tries to teach them speed. "We're in," a voice reports, a sigh of dust across the mic, and inside 3 people exhale as if someone had opened a small vent in their ribs. The airlock cycles through its script, dust drops to the mats, suits give up their grit reluctantly, helmets lift and hair lies down. Boots knock red from their treads, A new pile under the bench that will be brushed into the jar marked storm when the jar stops being shy. Lunch is simpler because it needs to be. Soup that steams like an apology, pond cake squares that do not mind being called pond cake, 3 basil leaves chopped fine and shared into bowls for the smell it makes more than the taste. The jar of salt does not need to appear, but does. People sit with their backs to walls, not from fear, but for the way walls talk during weather. A slight, low sound that says, steady, steady, steady. Children swallow first and then listen for the tone like kittens clocking a familiar door. Old stories are told, but they are not the grand ones, not the making a home ones. They are smaller and therefore more useful. The engineer who tied a broom handle onto the panel brush because the storm forgot to be short. How it taught everyone that leverage can be printed. The time the oxygenator ran jealous and they had to divide hours by work, sleep, patience, how time of all things made everything taste less like metal that week. The day a rover's camera saw its own tracks vanish behind it, and the driver sang old songs to keep the steering hand honest. Eyes drift to the children when the stories reach the part where waiting does not mean doing nothing. Waiting is the job. Inside, fabrics act like new versions of themselves. Door cloths go up, seams learn to be more serious. Every mat with a fringe points inward, because inward is where the dust will be persuaded to stop. The recycler wears its storm face, a little more gruff, a little more protective, water not invited to evaporate anywhere casual. A gauge on the oxygen line dips a single digit and 3 heads turn. Then it steadies. A child, who has been told how to read the good numbers and the bad ones, taps the place on his drawing where the dome's heart is and colors it dark green. Okay, he says to the page and by extension to the room. The sound of the storm arrives last. It is not a roar. It is a hand of sand testing the dome's skin and finding it not to its taste. It is panels scolding their clips, so the clips will remember their vows. It is the maintenance arm, tucked and patient, humming to itself so the hinge will not forget to be gentle later. It is a soft crackle in hair under a cap in a corridor where air rubs itself thinner. It is every small thing saying, I am where I said I would be. Afternoon becomes a practice. Lights step down again, not dramatically, just to the level that says, we will have more if we use less. Chargers sulk in their hooks and are forgiven. Screens accept a theme called Storm Night that trims edges and turns white to polite gray. In the library, the 3 paperbacks are put back in their bin and the spiral-bound files come forward. A woman reads a recipe for a cake no one can make here and smiles anyway because it is a list of ordinary verbs. Stir, fold, rest, wait, and that is exactly what the dome is doing. In school, the children are moved to the inside half of the room. The teacher hands out strips of indicator paper that will darken if CO2 goes impolite and says, tape this to a chair leg, please, and remember where you put it. They comply as seriously as surgeons. He taps a graph on the wall and the class chants the safe numbers like weather. One girl adds quietly, and if the tone stands up straight, we go to green. And the teacher nods because drills should be complete thoughts even when they do not need to be used. The baker invents crackers again because crackers are a way to turn waiting into chewing. She salts them as if the jar were not pretending to be for events only, and no one tattles. The colony understands triage in kitchens. She breaks one and holds the two halves to her ears like shells, and hears the storm twice, softer. She gives the halves to the nearest two children and watches their mouths become busy with purpose. The medic sets an extra caddy under the bench near the airlock. Masks, glove liners, a printed patch kit with instructions that even hands turned clumsy by hurry could obey. She hopes it will be bored. Bored caddies are the ones that live the longest. She counts headlamps and moves one to the far end of the corridor because balance is a real thing even when it only looks like neatness. The tone sounds once more in the late day, those same 3 notes, not higher, not faster. Hold, it says in the language of the dome. The people answer by resettling their shoulders and finishing the jobs their hands had already chosen. A teenager sets a new strip of tape along the floor where a cart should line up if someone needs it in a hurry later. No one steps on the tape until it has learned its place. By early evening, the dust has decided to be tireless, and the panels answer by being stubborn. Storage ticks down into the band called Sensible. The fuel cells clear their throats and begin to sing under their breath. The greenhouse glows like a lantern whose owner knows how to shade it. The winds press and lift in moods. The dome answers with a slow flexion that spreads everything into almost nothing, the way a hand spreads a weight across a table so the table remembers being a tree and does not mind. Children drift toward naps in chairs that do not look like beds but have learned how to be. Adults talk in low work voices about nothing important. The way the crackers taste more like crackers this time. How the basil cuttings have decided to be generous. Who should trade a reading shift at the oxygenators panel with whom so no one listens alone. No one says it will be fine because that is a phrase for other planets. They say, we've got margin, and wake me if the tone becomes a line, and remember to sip, not gulp. And here is the 5th truth, set down with dust on the mats and a hand on a hatch that has learned not to squeak. You would not last a day in a Mars colony because you expect danger to arrive with trumpets and panic to be useful. Here, danger arrives as a bar that shortens, a tone that steps down, a vellum lowering over light. Panic buys you nothing, practice buys you hours. People here do not pray for exceptions, they budget for weather. They close louvers, shade leaves, hush screens, salt crackers, move headlamps, tape a line on the floor. They make safety out of chores. The red outside keeps pressing. The dome keeps answering. Between those two courtesies, evening will find its way. Evening arrives the way the dome prefers everything to arrive, by negotiation. The storm presses its red hand against the world. Inside, lights step down another breath, pumps smooth their voices, and people turn toward each other with the efficiency of those who have practiced calm until it became muscle. The galley is warmer than the corridors, a small climate on purpose. Steam beads the ceiling tiles and learns to be orderly. It runs to a lip and vanishes into a gutter that returns it to the recycler, which clears its throat once in gratitude. Dinner is a pattern with room for invention. A vat of soup, greens, a patient starch, the shadow of pepper, rolls in low tides. Pond cake has been sliced and toasted until the edges remember audacity. The baker shakes a jar of dried basil over the tray and smiles when the scent turns the air a shade greener. Crackers, today's storm-born experiment, cool on a rack, salted like common sense. Cups line up for the hot drink that is not coffee and has stopped apologizing for it. People arrive in streams, trays in hands, voices low from the habit of not competing with fans. Seating follows the dome's etiquette rather than any map. Elders prefer the spots where a bulkhead can be leaned on. Those coming off shift slide to edges in case the tone asks something of their legs. Children absorb the warm middle and arrange their spoons into constellations while they wait. The jar labeled Salt, Event, sits near the end of the table, pretending to be shy. Someone draws it close and uses a literal pinch. Someone else watches and does not scold. Storms loosen rules, practice tightens them again without being asked. A checklist lives under a magnet near the serving line, not for food but for the power budget. Galley lights, low. Ovens ECO. Charger strip disabled. Display kiosk, DIM. A teenager taps each line with a finger as if casting a mild spell. Near the door, a board shows panel output sinking into the sensible bands, storage steady, fuel cells humming in their polite voices. The board does not blink or dramatize. It merely keeps everyone in the same sentence. The first bowls go to the smallest hands. A woman with basil-dusted fingers ladles careful halves again and again until halves add up to equal. The steam writes its brief alphabet on each face and disappears. The children blow in unison, learned choreography, and set down their bowls to listen for the tone before they pick up spoons. The tone does not sound. Spoons lift. Conversation stays in the shallow end of language. How were the panels? Stubborn. K7 is behaving. Don't tell it, I said that. Was the soup as nice at lunch? Less nice, more honest. Jokes stay local, serviceable. Someone hums the melody that the keyboard and drum and smuggled flute know by heart. Someone else knocks the table twice in the right places, the dome's tacit metronome. The storm makes its presence known by magnifying small things rather than adding loud ones. Hair stands slightly on end when someone removes a cap. Sleeves cling. A napkin drifts and seems to decide mid-air to fall in a different direction. Children notice and give the phenomenon a name that sticks for a week. An elder taps a knuckle against the viewport's inner pane and hears the perfect dullness that means integrity. She nods at nothing and returns to her soup. After seconds, and there are seconds, the galley becomes again what it always is between meals, a factory for order. Rinse water becomes plant water, becomes grey water, becomes a line on the recycler's panel that climbs at a reasonable pace. Cloths seek hooks, hooks receive cloths. The rack of drying mugs changes colors as the storm's palette sneaks through the resin in their handles. A child is sent with a slosh-proof jug to top up the stations along the main loop. He walks like a sacred courier and is treated as one. At each stop, hands that are not his move aside from tasks and say thanks in voices that keep thanks light so as not to weigh down work. In the common room, instruments greet their owners like well-trained animals. The keyboard flickers up with a patched smile where an old drop cracked a corner of its plastic. The drum's printed frame has a tightness that means someone warmed it near a radiator this afternoon. Sound will be clean tonight. The flute tests a note and decides to be humble. The trio begins not with song but with scale, a way to let the room remember itself in pitches. Children drift into a semicircle that is also a listening net. The music is not performance. It is the colony checking its pulse through a different vein. A corner of the room holds the library's spirals and the 3 contraband paperbacks. Tonight, the paperbacks remain in their bin, their leaves bruised too easily in damp air. Screens glow instead, dimmed to storm night. A pair of young mechanics read a manual with their heads almost touching, whispering through a diagram like conspirators. On the facing bench, someone scrolls through a cookbook that says, "Fold and rest and until just set," and smiles as if the words were a weather report from a kinder planet. At the notice board, blue cards and yellow cards see each other like neighbors across a lane. Someone has added in pencil beneath the yellow "indoor only" until further notice, "Let the devils dance without us. No one erases it." A new blue appears. Trade. 1 hour reading at Oxypanel for 2 cuttings of mint. Below it, in another hand, deal after storm. A child tucks a drawing of the dome with a cape into the corner again. Storms always make the cape longer. The medic's cart arrives as if guided by smell. Basil, hot metal, and the faint iron that means skin has been rubbed a little raw by a suit cuff and not complained about. She stands like a lighthouse, a steady thing that people can orient to without effort. "Water," she says to some, "sit," to others, "walk," to one whose leg has cramped under a table. She rests a palm on a brow and declares no fever, which is as good job in this place. She tells a story about a cousin who used to measure summer by the hum of air conditioners, and how strange it is now to listen for the music of fans and find it real comfort. A child whispers, "What's an air conditioner?" And 3 adults answer at once with 3 different metaphors, all of them kind. With the greenhouse shades down, that room feels like the inside of a lantern. People visit the way you visit a chapel, voice lowered by something gentler than rules. A botanist runs her fingers along a leaf so the water beads gather where the plant can drink without the bead turning into a lens that might scorch. Even in storms, light does what it does. She untwists a tie and reties it softer. She says, "Good," to a row that has recently decided not to sulk. She lets 2 children pinch basil at the nodes and then makes them rub the green between their fingers and breathe. They grin as if told a good secret. When one asks if plants can hear the storm, she answers in a science that sounds like love. They can hear me, and that's enough. Communications receive their own rationed hour. The relay is awake, but power is a thing to be courted, not spent. Messages grow short and dear. Someone schedules a 1-minute call to Earth and spends 10 minutes rehearsing the 1 minute. When it comes, her mother's face arrives thinner and more pixel than on Clear Souls. They exchange 3 sentences each as polished as gems and promise longer later. After, the daughter sits with a mug over her mouth, breathing the steam, memorizing the shape of the promise so she can keep it in her chest when the tone sounds again. The tone does not sound again. Instead, the dome gives its evening cough, filters turning a page, pump slipping into a lower key. A hush follows that is not silence but agreement. Lights sink to the level that makes faces beautiful. The keyboard serves the 3 chords everyone knows. The drum finds the heartbeat. The flute lays a thin thread over the top and ties it off with a breath. People handle their plates and cups the way you handle tools on a ship. Every move a conversation with space. Stories, when they come, choose the domestic scale. The one about the blown fuse that made the printed oven forget what golden meant, and how the baker learned to hear doneness instead. The one about phosphorescent algae that glowed on a dare and terrified a janitor, gently, briefly, so that now the janitor puts a glow bead in his pocket on purpose when he does rounds in the dark, as if carrying a star meant nothing could be lost. The one about a power dip mid-birthday that made everyone sing the last half of the song without instruments, and taught the youngest that music is an excellent candle. Someone produces a game board printed on flexible sheet, checkers by way of engineering. The pieces are magnets with faces, and they grip the table with the satisfying click of intention. A child plays by new rules they invent as they go. An adult pretends not to notice, then notices just enough to be beaten fairly. Somewhere there is laughter, the kind that does not spike but ripples, leaving the pump's song intact. Dinner calm becomes evening calm. The galley cools, cloths go from damp to ready, trays find their nests like birds obeying a good habit. The storm outside changes key, less insistence, more endurance. Fuel cells cruise. The board says margin, and the word relaxes shoulders the way warm water does a spine. A worker refills a headlamp caddy and moves it 3 finger widths, because 3 finger widths will matter if someone reaches for it later in a hurry. The act is witnessed by no one and learned by everyone anyway. Children are collected by names, not voices, and brushed into pajamas that are really just softer jumpsuits, with the knees reinforced in places that were not obviously knees until someone learned children kneel to look at small things. Teeth are brushed with paste that still refuses to foam. A child asks if storms love the dome. They pay attention to it, comes the answer, and we pay attention back. That counts here as love. By the time the instruments fold their sounds and the screens give up their light, the corridors have taken on a tide pool hush. Footsteps go lighter. A last tray makes its last journey to the recycler and becomes tomorrow along a clear tube. The notice board yawns. The jar of salt returns to its shelf like a hero taking off a cape. Somewhere a door cloth is pinned at its exact corners, so the world stays in the right places. And here is the 6th truth, setting itself down with the same care as a cup on a tray. You would not last a day in a Mars colony because you think rest comes after danger. Here rest is made during danger, cooked and counted and tuned. It is ladled, salted, shared. It is measured in lumens and decibels and grams. It is braided from crackers and cords, from basil pinched exactly where new leaves will thank you. Safety is not the absence of weather. Safety is people who know how to eat, sing, wipe, tape, dim, and laugh, while the weather remembers its job outside. The red hand tests the glass. The glass answers with dull, perfect sound. Inside, voices fall to the level that lets the pumps be the loudest thing. Evening holds. Night takes the dome the way frost takes glass, quietly from the edges inward until everything knows what hour it is. The storm keeps a hand on the world but loosens its grip. Dust hisses softer along the outer skin. Inside, the pumps lower their voices to the key called night, and the lights withdraw to a blue that makes metal gentler and faces kind. Births fold the colony back into itself. Each bunk slides on rails with the whisper of good manners, curtains drawn and clipped, little privacy lights winking to the dimmest useful. The air tastes the same, dry and a little coin-bright, but cooler now, like a promise kept. The corridor displays take off their numbered shoes. Panel output, storage, fuel cells, oxygen partials, all still there, all padded at the edges. A single line at the board says indoor only continues. Storm setting stable. Margin good. No one nods in triumph. Margin is the opposite of triumph. Margin is sleep. The galley lays its tools down. Cloths hang like prayer flags drying into tomorrow. Mugs, upside down, make a skyline along the rack, each beaded with one clear drop that will remember its job at dawn. The jar labeled Salt Event has returned to its shelf and looks suddenly like a normal jar. The notice board exhales. Blue cards wait to be answered when the dust forgets itself. Yellow cards doze, half-turned like watchdogs who know nothing is expected of them but will wake if asked. The common room softens to a tide pool. The keyboard sleeps with its patch smile. The drum's heat loosens, the smuggled flute tucks itself under cloth. A single maintenance bot glides its half-speed patrol, brushes whispering. The janitor walks with the steady stride of a man who has made a treaty with routine. In his breast pocket, the bead of phosphorescent algae glows a domestic green, a traveling star he pretends is for children and might be for himself. He tests a latch with 2 fingers, the way a good sailor tests a line, not distrustful, just interested. Greenhouse night is a room full of sleeping lungs. Shades stay down. The air is warm as a breath exhaled and not yet taken back. Timers tick. Drippers count. Leaves shine where the humid air has folded itself into beads along their margins. A botanist in a soft hood moves like punctuation between rows, adding 1 loop of tie here, 1 tap of emitter there, the smallest corrections that will save the most water. She pauses at the basil and pinches 2 tips, the last kindness of the day, pressing the green between finger and thumb and breathing it like a benediction before letting it go. The Oxy panel has a chair that everyone insists is comfortable. It isn't quite, that's the point. No one ever outstays a watch when the chair is honest. 2 people trade it by agreement written in blue on the board. 1 hour each, eyes on the CO, 2 scrubbers' breath, ears tuned to the saboteur's purr. On the screen, numbers walk a narrow path. A filter flips a page. The tone that marks the flip is as ordinary as a clock tick. Good, says the first watcher under their breath. Still good, says the second an hour later, and writes the words in the log where no one will read them and everyone will feel them in the morning. In Med, the cart sleeps with its drawers half open, the on-call doctor's superstition against waking them to wake them. She sits on a stool that remembers 100 night shifts and looks at hands, at nails that have become black crescents from panel brushes, at the small red quarter moons left by suit cuffs. She writes 2 notes, more water, fewer heroics, and mint cuttings promised to Jay. After storm, and sets a kettle on a plate that only pretends to boil. Steam is a luxury measured in grams here, not theatrics. A soft chime ushers the colony into night mode officially. Doors ease themselves into the set that resists dust. Vents alter their appetite. Louvers hold the position they adopted at dusk. In the schoolroom, indicator strips taped to chair legs keep their quiet promise to darken if the air forgets its manners. They don't. On a shelf, the jar with the seed wears its thin white ribbon a little longer. The child who asked earlier what rain sounds like sleeps with palms up, as if waiting to catch it. The storm speaks to the dome in an older language now, less shove, more sand-sung vowel. The outer skin answers with that dull, perfect note when a knuckle taps it, the note elders pass down to apprentices like a secret chord. This is the sound of integrity. In the panel field, dust climbs the glass to no purpose. The maintenance arm curls around itself and dreams of joints that never sees. The berm holds. The tie-downs keep their oaths. The devils dance by themselves, bored. Inside, you pull your curtain and the enclosure of fabric takes the size of your breath. The bunk is not soft, not hard. It is correct, a surface that tells every bone it is seen. A faint grid of glow paint marks the emergency latch, and the latch marks itself back in memory even as you close your eyes. Your ears sought the dome's nocturne, the gentle thrum of loop pumps, the long-thought sigh when a filter turns, the soft disciplinary tick a valve gives itself at interval, a cable somewhere finding a new, easier angle with a microscopic ping. What would be noise on Earth is lullaby here. Every sound means someone did a job on time. Somewhere a little farther from sleep, 2 voices share the delayed, rationed blessing of Earth. You hear them through a bulkhead as you would hear strangers in a train station. Fragments, not words, tone more than content. See you. Okay, Ma. Then the delay's pocket of quiet, then laughter arriving like a letter. The call clicks done. A cup is set on a rail. The person breathes in steam, holds it, lets it go. The dome takes the breath in, does its arithmetic, and gives it back to someone else as tomorrow's water. Night rounds intersect like orbits. The janitor's brush line, greenhouse checks, oxy panel watches, a quick hand under a hatch to feel for draft that shouldn't be there and isn't. A teenager with guard duty for the first time walks the spine corridor with a too big headlamp in his hand and doesn't turn it on because the blue is enough. He touches the tape stripe he laid earlier today and finds it still where he put it, a small and perfect success. He peeks through a viewport and catches a slit of star between drifting dust, sharp enough to make the word far seem newly invented. Something in his ribcage changes its mind about what home means. He doesn't tell anyone, and he doesn't need to. Some births hold whispered stories that carry no weight, and so are allowed to be extravagant. A child retells the day's heroics as if crackers ended storms, and basil shamed the wind into politeness. The adult listening does not correct the physics. Correction can wait until morning. They add one detail, that the dome listened back to the storm and said hold, and the storm listened. Whether that is true is irrelevant to sleep. The version that gets you to morning is the correct one, for the night. Systems keep their own counsel. The recycler swallows a last clear rope of condensate and blinks the soft-eyed contentment of a machine that has done exactly enough. The fuel cells hum like bees in a storybook. Storage charts a slow, graceful arc that will flatten just before dawn if the wind keeps its bargain. In Bay K7, where light panels sulked earlier, a fresh board runs a hair cooler than its neighbors, proud to be new. The logger draws a line there no one will notice unless it changes shape. The storm tests a last opinion around midnight and moves off to find a slope better at arguing. The dome recognizes the change by ear. Pressure eases, dust loses its fine spite. The maintenance arm stretches a joint as if remembering it is allowed to move again soon. No tone sounds. A watcher at the oxy panel writes, storm easing, margin better, as if writing good night to a child. Sleep thickens. The colony's dreams are practical. A baker measures with hands without flour. A mechanic threads a bolt without losing the nut. A botanist ties a loop that knows to slip tomorrow. A boy tapes a line the right 3 finger widths from the last one, and the tape is somehow a road. Your own dream is a corridor without doors, where the hum holds you up the way a river holds a leaf. You never reach the end. That is the point. Sometimes, once in the blue of night, the dome clears its throat. Not alarm, not request, just the bodily reminder of a large thing taking care of itself. A single spoon quiet ping echoes softly from somewhere metal. Curtains do not stir. Shoulders do not tighten. The silence after is full, not empty. Down the long hall, a last lamp clicks itself to a lower pulse. 2 hands, one old, one young, meet on the oxy panel chair back, trading watch without making a moment of it. The elder says, listen, and the younger does. They hear the filters turn, the pump smooth, the sabatier purr, the green place breathe, and the storm forgetting them by degrees. That, the elder says, is what we sleep to. The younger nods, having learned a new lullaby. Here is the 7th truth, set gently where a cup will not ring the table. You would not last a day in a Mars colony because you think safety is a wall you lock and then forget. Here it is, a verb performed in the dark. Curtains clipped, louvers held, watches traded, numbers read, seeds checked, strips untarnished, headlamps moved 3 finger widths to where hands will find them without looking. Night is not the absence of risk. It is the presence of practiced attention, quiet enough to let a whole habitat breathe in time. The red beyond the glass recedes to a rumor. The dome hums. And between those 2 truths, people sleep. Morning returns as a change in pitch before it shows itself in light. The pumps lift their voices a half note, the filters flip a page, The fuel cells ease from song to hum as the board writes margin better in its thin, polite font. Blue along the floor softens through pearl into the colony's small amber day. Curtains unclip, bunks slide home with courteous rails, the soft grid of glow paint returns to being a reminder rather than a plan. The storm has left its handwriting everywhere, but it's a tidy script. Door cloths wear a darker hem of red that will brush into a jar before breakfast. Mats show the places feet learned to step widest. A faint metal taste lingers in the air the way laughter lingers in a corridor after you've turned the corner. The notice board yawns and reorders itself. The yellow card about indoor only is turned face down and left there for an hour, respectful of the work it did. A new blue appears, thanks to Night Watch, basil cuttings at noon as promised, and under it someone has drawn 2 small moons making good faces. The galley remembers how to be generous. The kettle ticks while it decides to boil within the rules. Pond cake meets the heater and comes away with edges that believe in themselves again. The baker breaks last night's storm crackers into a bowl and crumbles basil over them. Savory breakfast by accident and practice. The jar labeled Salt Event has resumed being honestly shy. A tiny pinch escapes it anyway, as if to say, well done. Cups line up under a spout that releases hot drink that is not coffee. No one apologizes for it. Steam becomes a small weather above each hand. People arrive sleep-haired and good-eyed, the way people look when nothing woke them that shouldn't have. The first bowls go to the smallest hands because habit outruns appetite. Children blow and look toward the board out of reflex. When it does not blink, they grin into their spoons and turn back to their constellations of cutlery. Conversation wanders from quiet to ordinary. Which panels sulked, which didn't. How K7 ran 5/10 cooler on the new board, as if proud of it. How the fuel cells sang in a minor key and then decided on major just before dawn. Heard it, someone says, and foreheads nod because they heard it too. In the suit bay, orange comes off hooks like a promise kept. Even on a calm morning, no one hurries. Buddy eyes, buddy hands, the tech murmurs, palm on seam, thumb finding valves by name. Filters that were swapped early are checked anyway. Oxygen bottles thrum to a test note. Wrist gaskets get their smear of respect. The airlock clears its throat. Pressure steps down in a dignified sequence. The outer door unlatches with the sound you feel more than hear. Outside is still the same planet, but it wears last night's mood as a film on the glass. The first crew moves through a small world of their own noise. Fans, pumps, the tiny sand scratch that is not wind, but wind's rumor. The maintenance arm uncurls like a waking cat and salutes with an elbow. Panel row C holds its chin up to the sun. A brush passes and the red gives way, reluctant and then relieved. A hinge that learned to complain during the storm is told kindly to behave with a drop of patience. The berm is exactly where they left it. The tie-downs remember their oaths without being reminded. Far out, a devil tries to pretend it still matters and fails with dignity. Inside, the greenhouse raises its shades with the shyness of a patient being told they can sit up now. Air shifts from damp to merely good. Drippers lose their caution. Mist returns to the schedule that helps beans decide to be generous. A botanist walks the lanes with a soft hood and a softer voice, lifting leaves to look for the fine grit storms encourage. She finds it where she expects and wipes it with a cloth that knows to leave no lenses behind. The pollinator bots blink awake, lazy gold again. A child stands at the rail and waves them off like friends boarding a very small train. Basil gets pinched at the nodes exactly as promised on the card. The room smells briefly like a city that remembers gardens. School resumes its orbit. Indicator strips come off chair legs unstained and are saved in a folder titled Boring Good. The teacher updates the board. External, clear. UV unkind. CO2 polite. Stories, welcome. The class adds a new word to the storm glossary. Stipple, the sound of dust when it runs out of arguments. They test it by tapping their fingers lightly on their desks together. It sounds right, which is the same as being true here. In the workshop, yesterday's for later bin becomes today in a shallow rush. A hinge takes its place in a louver that sulked overnight. A cap keeps a jar honest. A printed spoon finds a hand that intends to stir with it for years. The printer head traces a new path with the confidence of a beetle in warm sand. A mechanic files the edge off an idea until it forgets how to cut. A teenager, taller by pride than by height, licenses himself to write in the log that column 12 has decided to be meek for now. His handwriting leans left. The log accommodates it without mercy or praise. Communications open with a jauntier chime than last night. Power can be spent on love again. Messages leave shaped like gratitude, arrive shaped like relief. A grandmother on Earth holds up rain at the window as if to share it by pixels. A child here knocks on the lid of a jar to answer with the small applause of water. Someone schedules a long call not for today but for the next calm soul because patience is a savings account with real interest here. The delay laughs the way it always does, and the laugh takes the edges off words without blunting their meaning. Cleaning is celebratory without being noisy. Door cloths come down and visit a basin. Their hems give up a thin red that looks like punctuation at the bottom of a sentence. Mats go outside to shake their storm out against the berm. Dust returns to where dust can be good, tamping paths, keeping glare down, reminding you whose planet this is. The recycler accepts basin water with a pleased blink. In its clear throat, yesterday's breath and last night's steam and this morning's dishwater decide who will become plant and who will become sip. The notice board hosts closure. Yellow, indoor only lifted. Panel sweep complete. Louver 7 hinge replaced. Thanks to Night Watch. Blue. Mint cuttings at noon. Trade for hour at Oxy panel still on. Underneath, someone has added a new tape stripe at the bottom with a date and 2 words. Storm kept. No one claims authorship. The board knows. The galley puts out a plate that isn't on any plan. Slices of something that pretends to be fruit and almost gets away with it. 2 children share one slice with the kind of concentration that would cure a disease if it were pointed in a different direction. The baker invents a ritual on the spot. First calm day cracker broken into 4 and given to the nearest 4 hands, each piece salted as if the jar were just salt and not a character. For luck, she says, and everyone accepts that luck is simply attention with crumbs. Outside, the last of the storm's personality lifts and wanders off to bother a hill that deserves it. Inside, a botanist loosens one tie that was kind yesterday and would be mean this afternoon. A medic writes fewer heroics achieved in a margin where only she will see it. The oxy-panel chair stands empty for a blessed 15 minutes while a watcher makes themselves tea on purpose. The colony recognizes the luxury of those 15 minutes with the same seriousness it reserves for alarms. Children take a field trip to the viewport with the ladder. A wiper arm, lately storm brave, makes its arc. Red smears, then clears. The far hills reappear in their honest distance. Knuckles test the inner glass. Dull, perfect. A line of small hands taps back, not to test, just to greet. Outside, panel rows reflect the sun like a field of obedient lakes. The maintenance arm, proud of how little it did at the right times, preens a joint and pretends it was all on purpose. By mid-morning, the day has reassembled itself as if it never left. Power climbs into the kind band. Storage stops frowning. The algae tone regains its complacency. No one resents it for long. A new line appears on the schoolroom wall. A calendar of storms drawn by children, each a red spiral in pencil. Not to glamorize, but to remember. The teacher adds a small star sticker next to last night's and says, "Good work," to a class that did very little and did it beautifully. Lunch carries the flavor of reward without waste. Soup has more basil than it strictly needs. Pancake slices look taller, though they are the same. The jar of salt acts normal and is used normally. Someone starts the 3-chord song and stops after 2 because the pumps today are carrying the melody better than the human instruments would. In the library corner, a spiral-bound manual is replaced by one of the contraband paperbacks for the first time in a week. Its paper smells like old sun. 2 readers lean in as if to warm their faces at it. The storm becomes a report, numbers on a graph, a paragraph in the log, a dot of red in a row of dots of red, not proof of danger, proof of practice. Tools go back with their handles facing out. Headlamp caddies are refilled and moved 3 finger widths back to where hands will remember them by the remembering. The for later bin empties and refills with different things. The day continues its soft arithmetic. Oxygen partials, kilowatt hours, liters, spoons, leaves, minutes of watch. It would be tidy to declare a moral and ring a bell. The colony declines tidy. Instead, it returns to itself, sweeping, tying, taping, salting, pinching, listening. There will be another storm and another. Some will be playful, some tiresome, one perhaps not kind. People do not rehearse panic. They rehearse attention. They close louvers and open them. They shade leaves and lift shades. They move headlamps and write in logs and tap the glass for the dull, perfect note and eat crackers that turned waiting into something you could chew. Here is the 8th truth, then, set down as quietly as a cup on a rail. You would not last a day in a Mars colony because you think survival is a series of crises to be outrun. Here, it is the continuity between them, the chores braided into care, the margins built in teaspoons, the habit of turning toward each other before turning toward alarms. The red beyond the dome will always have opinions. The dome will always answer in the key called practice. Between those two, life stands up, clears the table, waters the basil, and hums the pump's song until it becomes yours too. So let the day widen. Let panels shine and leaves drink and the notice board collect its blue and yellow cards like laundry folded into right places. Let the maintenance arm stretch. Let the children tap rain on their desks when rain is a story and not a forecast. Let sleep, when it comes again, find you where the dome breathes and people do their work, and the world outside, patient and red, keeps its distance with the respect that attention earns.